As Glyndebourne's music director, Vladimir Jurowski is also a collaborator and the conductor of Jonathan Kent's production of Mozart's Don Giovanni, first staged at Glyndebourne in 2010. I talked to Vladimir between rehearsals a couple of weeks before the opening night. Well, welcome and thank you for finding time between rehearsals for this. Can I just start by asking a rather general question about Don Giovanni? What are for you the key moments in the score that define what the piece is?
For me, the key moments are all those where Don Giovanni meets with Commendatore. So it is obviously the introduction, the graveyard scene, and their final encounter, the dinner scene. This is the triangle upon which the entire building of the opera is erected. My feeling is that it's only after the composition of the graveyard scene, and especially of the dinner scene, with this absolutely haunting music of the Commendatore's arrival, that he had this ingenious idea to start il dramma giocoso, which is another term for opera buffa, with the theme of death. And this is by far the only piece of his time, not just by Mozart, but of his time, of the entire epoch, which starts like this. Don Giovanni is a philosophical piece about life, and it starts with the theme of death. So, musically speaking, all of those encounters with death are for me the pivotal and the most topical moments of the score.
And having started in that very, very dramatic way, and on the theme of death, can it then make the transition back, as it were, to being a comedy, do you think?
Well, it does it permanently and extremely fluently. I can only think of Shakespeare as another comparison, because Shakespeare was, again, someone who knew exactly how to combine the drama and the comedy. Within an instant, he switches from one to another. Think of The Winter's Tale, or Hamlet, or any of his big dramas. They're all full of comedy moments, maybe less so Hamlet, but yet in Hamlet there are gravediggers, and the scene is very funny in its very black way. And so here it happens immediately at the switch from the initial andante to the molto allegro of the overture. And then obviously it's continued by Leporello, the buffo element. But not for very long, because then we have Donna Anna bursting in with Giovanni. And we have a very dramatic scene which is hard to place stylistically. It's neither buffo nor seria. But then with the arrival of Commendatore, things get more and more tragic, and then we have this incredibly Sturm und Drang driven duet between Anna and Ottavio, which follows this scene of the killing. And it is with this with the end of this duet that the entire introduction, which started with the first chord of the overture, ends. So Mozart created an incredible through-composed arc in which all the elements, the buffo and the serio, are already contained.
Now you've decided to go for the Vienna version, the 1788 version. What are the differences that people may find from what they may be used to, and why have you chosen this version?
For many years, most of the theatres in the world have either favored the original Prague version, or they did the so-called hybrid version, which contained the full Prague version as well as the later added numbers, some of the later added numbers, which were added a year later for the Vienna premiere. I myself have never understood why this hybrid version became so popular, because to me, theatrically and musically speaking, it was just a huge list of numbers rather than a coherent dramatic action. Now, Prague version is, of course, the most original and the most taught one. But then the famous Elvira's aria Mitra D from Act 2 is missing. And also the very beautiful, and I think the very important for understanding of the character of Don Ottavio, aria Dalla sua pace from Act 1 is missing. But when you do the hybrid and just add these numbers on top of what was there before, you destroy the dramatic and also the tonal structure, which Mozart was very, very aware of. So when deciding upon the versions, we, of course, first wanted to go for the Prague, as presumably anyone doing the piece today. But then there came the request from our Don Elvira, Kate Royal, who desperately wanted to do her first Elvira with Mitra D. And then Jonathan and I have looked at the Vienna version, and to our astonishment, we found that in its originality, in the way that Mozart constructed it in 1788, it is almost far better dramatically than the Prague version, because it explains the character in a much better way.
And what do you think was in Mozart's mind to make those revisions? What does it say about the way he was thinking about the piece?
I think he was thinking in most practical terms. He had singers who were different from his Prague singers. He had a very good Don Elvira who wanted an extra aria. He had a Don Ottavio who was probably less capable technically, because the original aria del mio tesoro presented a real problem for him, the coloraturas. So Mozart wrote a much more mellow and technically less demanding, though an immensely beautiful aria Dalla sua pace.
I must just ask you about the role of Don Giovanni himself, played in this production by Gerald Finlay, because you're never quite sure. It is quite an ambiguous role. You never know whether he's good, bad, or somewhere in between. How do you see the role of Don Giovanni?
Well, in general, I think there aren't any good or bad protagonists in Mozart operas, like there aren't any really good or bad protagonists in Shakespeare plays. Even the most rotten villains have something human in them. And that's the fascination with Shakespeare, and so it is with Mozart. Giovanni is a really an extreme case of the amount of sins this man encompasses, embodies. But at the same time, there is something extremely fascinating about him, and that's mainly his capacity of living the moment. He is anti-reflection. He defies reflection as a principle, and yet he strives for the absolute independence or absolute autonomy, which goes as far as driving him to complete solitude. You asked me about the pivotal moments of the drama, the central moments of the drama for me in the score. I forgot to mention another one, and that's Don Giovanni's canzonetta with mandolin in Act 2. Because this is for me an absolutely central scene in understanding Don Giovanni. Because this is the only time when he's completely alone. He's on his own. And what he sings, in a way, contradicts his actions, because the music is so heartfelt and so beautiful, and also somehow incredibly sad. And I think this part of Don Giovanni is very interesting to me, the infinite sadness about him, of which he is maybe not even aware. Well, it makes the things even worse, that he is not really aware of his problems and is running away from them. But then at the end he feels so completely alone, so completely superior to anybody else living on this earth, that his only escape is into the otherworldly dimension. So he defies God, he challenges God by inviting the statue to dinner. He's challenging God to the duel. If you are up there, then show yourself. Or maybe there is nothing up there. And that's where Giovanni, you could say fails, but you could also say this is where Giovanni's second life begins. Because at least he's given the chance to repent, which he's not using. There is a man who stands looking death in the eyes and not looking away, not lowering his gaze and not giving in, which might be, simply lack of any sensitivity rather than courage. But it makes him extremely fascinating.